So this week on the headlines, we'll be bringing you a documentary film about a Palo Alto man who's been battling Lou Gehrig's disease since 2013. Rather than to succumb to isolation and depression, John Ferraiolo and his wife, Kang, have really been celebrating their life together, making the most of their time, marking family milestones, daughters' marriages, and births of grandchildren, and finding a lot of joy in their everyday lives. Sue Dremann, our reporter, and also our videographer, Veronica Weber, spent a lot of time with the Ferraiolos over the last couple months to produce this really intimate portrait of what it's like to battle this disease, but really come out with a very positive attitude about life on the other end. So Sue joins me now to give a little bit of the backstory before we show you the film itself that Veronica put together. So I'm curious if you could share a little bit about what their lives were like before his diagnosis.
Well, life for them was pretty much like everybody else in Silicon Valley. They basically both had high-powered jobs. She is a branding strategist, working with important Silicon Valley clients. He was a mastermind of graphical interfaces, as a software engineer, working for both Adobe and then later on for IBM. And they raised a family, 3 beautiful daughters, and that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. And could you tell us how you ended up reporting on this story and why the Ferraiolos gave you so much access to their lives?
Well, they basically ran into our publisher's wife, and I understand that Bill Johnson, our publisher, used to be the I guess he was like the soccer coach for where their kids all grew up together, and so they saw that he had this illness, and he was willing to talk about it. And I think basically what they really wanted to do was give access to us. They were very, very open, just tremendously open about letting us into their lives and telling their story. And really they want people to understand the disease, and also that there is hope. You can still have a joyous life even when you have a terminal diagnosis.
Yeah, I really appreciate that in the story, Karen, saying, there's this stigma and sort of this sad smile or feeling that she gets when she interacts with people, and
right.
Her wanting other people to understand, we're still just human beings, and maybe he can't walk and he's lost some of his abilities, but he's still the same person inside, and she is as well. So
right.
To sort of treat them normally and to spend time with them. And
well, I think sometimes, one of the things that she talked about too is that with ALS, you're basically paralyzed, but everything inside your brain is just,
right.
your cognition is still there. You're still the same person. But that's basically, people often when they're facing a terminal illness will shut themselves away, and or you'll have family who, and friends who don't come around because they just don't know what to do. So being open about the illness is something that they think is really important.
What did you find most remarkable about seeing their lives up close?
I would have to say just their remarkable attitudes and their bravery facing this illness. They're just very warm people, and I think just the idea that you can basically, I think there's sort of a spiritual level of development that people go through whenever you have to face a terminal illness, for a lot of people anyway. And so you can choose to succumb to an illness, or you can decide that you're going to vanquish it, at least on a psychological level, and just live your life the best you can.
Yeah. And I think it's easy to say that about many stories, but reading and then watching the video that Veronica created, you really get this genuine sense of positivity, and their bond and the relationship and the strength that they draw from each other is totally genuine. And not to say that there, of course, aren't hard points, I'm sure, but you really, really get that sense from them.
Well, they say, basically we have moments that are very difficult. And have to go off in the closet and cry for a little bit, but then they just don't succumb to that. They keep moving forward. And I think that's the thing, is they really made a conscious decision. Part of it is their personalities as well, but they also made a conscious decision. Hey, we're not going to let this beat us. We're not going to just sit back and wait to die. We're going to really be positive. We're going to live life as much as we can. We're going to do as much as, find ways to do everything we want to do, and the things that they really value the most, which are family and friends and love, those are the things they've focused on.
And he also wrote a book, I understand. Could you tell me sort of a little bit about that and what the central message of the book is?
The Holy War for True Democracy. And basically, I think if he's thinking about, we're certainly going through some difficult times politically, and he just sees the media as being extremely important. It's very much manipulated, and being a technologist, he knows the levels at which media can be manipulated. So he really wanted to write a book that got to the heart of that and get people perhaps to join a nonprofit that he's forming called Democracy Guardians. And the idea behind that is to vet media and all different kinds, not just the news, but, let's say other ways in which things can be propagandized, and have a group of people who are trained to be able to basically analyze that and put that information out there for the public so they know what they're getting.
So it's like a fake news, anti-fake news kind of a
organization. Yes, very much, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think that John and Karen really want people to take away from their story?
Well, I think they want people to not be afraid. They want them to not be afraid to talk about the illness if they have it. They want them to not be afraid to face people who have the illness. And I think just to, once again, just to try to get out there, and as they said, is not to have the blinds closed. Let the sunlight in.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Well, now please enjoy the video that Veronica put together, A Vibrant Life, One Couple's Journey with ALS.
Okay, let's get your leash, okay? Okay, here we go.
He's always had a great sense of humor, always had the ability to make me laugh. ALS keeps your mind intact, and if you don't allow it to beat you down, you can still have that spirit. And that's what I see in John. I mean, he just has an incredible positive spirit and attitude and outlook on life. Because I ask him all the time, how's your mood? And what do you say to me? Wonderful. You're amazing.
You still look young.
We met in France. John was a Stanford undergrad, and I was a Mills student. A friend introduced us, and we went on a hitchhiking trip, and I really didn't know John that much. He was a kind of quiet guy, and he thought I was like this airhead Asian gal who laughed too much, and not really his type, perhaps. But we became good buddies. We hitchhiked and actually kind of fell in love on that trip.
I found Karen to be a fascinating person with a heart of gold. I really thought we were meant for each other.
Having 3 daughters, 2 of whom were twins, and Nikki, the oldest, was only 2 years older than them. So we had Nikki and then Natalie and Allison. All of a sudden, we had 3 kids in diapers at the same time. And John was just a marvelous father and a marvelous husband and partner.
The first indication was around April of 2013. I noticed something was off with my speaking.
What he told me was happening, and I could tell from his voice, He said that, he thought it was lingering effects from a bad cold that he had had. He was slurring and not being able to enunciate as he'd like to. So we went to a number of different doctors, and it took about, 14 months before we finally did go to a neurologist.
We'll be in this room right here. I'll check your blood pressure on your left arm. Is it too tight?
They sent us to Stanford to a neuromuscular neurologist, and she did further testing and sat us down and said, has anyone talked to you about ALS? And it was like, huh, what? And I was just like stunned, and I think John too. And we kind of looked at each other, and I said, well, how sure are you of this? And she said, about 70%.
So we've discussed this before. The medication isn't necessarily going to make you stronger. The hope is that it slows the progression of the disease. So if you were on a decline like this, then you would start to decline like this. It would sort of slow the progression.
At that point, I'm looking at John, and I'm trying to say, don't fall to pieces. Don't start, crying and sobbing, because John will think that there's no hope, and, there's 30% chance that this diagnosis isn't right. And we talked about it some more, and then that's when we just sat together, holding hands and crying. It was just really a very devastating diagnosis. How are we going to manage this? What's going to happen? What is life going to be like? And I imagine for John, it might have been even more frightening.
It's easier for me, much easier than for you.
Your right hand stronger than the left one. Right. So the way how we take it, we take off the good one first.
My joke about ALS is surrender your pride and dignity. After that, it's pretty easy. I actually worry more about my women in the family than me. They take it much harder.
One of the hardest things is just the everydayness of it. I'm a very creative person, and I like to have a lot of change in my life and do different things. And yeah, it can wear you down a little bit. Sometimes on the weekend, we don't always have caregiver coverage, and it makes for a really long day when you do everything yourself. There are only so many hours in the day, and there's endless amounts of things that you could do. It's just a lot of stuff that has to do with hygiene. Every time you do a therapy, there are all these hoses and masks and whatever, and you're just washing. Our supply cabinet, it's just chock full. There's just so much stuff. People, I think, don't have any idea.
I am high maintenance.
You're high maintenance, but you're worth it.
Yeah, so we don't need another Sharps container. We have one.
Alcohol pad?
We're fine with alcohol pads.
Has he been doing alcohol pads?
Yeah, he was at the ALS clinic.
And do you see any decline in physical conditions besides being getting worse?
So he says that he has less breath and his legs are
The other thing is just mental health. Sometimes you think that everything's just fine, and then something will happen, there'll be a setback, and there's just a tremendous emotional drain. And when that happens, you just don't feel capable of doing normal stuff. Being able to do my regular job and do all the other things that's required of people, sometimes it's just really hard. It's okay to cut yourself some slack if you're a caregiver and things are happening to your loved one and, just trying to cope with all of that. ALS is a terminal illness. We all know that. And unfortunately, ALS patients don't live that long. I think 3 to 5 years after diagnosis is the average. It can get kind of distressing. So I don't want to put any time on it, because then you're just counting the days till someone's going to be gone, and that's not what living is all about. Let's live each day, and let's not, we're not living to die, we're living to live.
He brought his voice and everything. That's right. Are you ticklish? Are you ticklish? Are you ticklish? Yes, you are, my goodness. My goodness. Oh, he's smiling.
There's all these milestones that John has been able to look forward to. Since he was diagnosed, our oldest got married. She just had a grandchild our first grandchild in December. Also in December, one of our twins, Allison, got married. And then in April, the second twin, Natalie, got married. So we have 3 weddings and a grandson. It sounds like a movie, right?
They're very good today. Like my mom and dad, like Karen and John, like Francis and Charles. We are witnessing, we're celebrating a love story. I would like to invite Natty and Paul to share their vows.
I love that you are incredibly intelligent and thoughtful. I love that you love your family, and I love that you make me feel loved all the time.
I love what a caring and kind person you are. I love that you put others above yourself. I love you, and there's no one else in the world I'd rather have by my side for good and bad.
Natalie Ferraiolo and Paul Manning, by the power vested in me in the state of California, I am pleased to pronounce you wife and husband. Go for it.
It was just a very meaningful event. It was a beautiful event, and I'm so glad that John was able to participate in that. We've been able to do a lot of things that we might not have done, seen a lot of people and family, people that mean a lot to us. So many people have reached out. We have visitors all the time. We're very, very lucky that way.
Because I have ALS, I don't have to work anymore. So I have much less stress. And I can focus on experiencing love with family and friends. Life is quite amazing if you take the time to pay attention.
He has a pretty terrible disease, and for the most part, he faces it with courage and dignity. And so I want people to know that you can live in the moment with someone that you love who has ALS, and find great joy in that. That just because someone has a disability or is not the same person in terms of their capabilities, they really are the same person inside, and hopefully that's the person that you fell in love with. That person is still there. I mean, even if their voice changes and they can't walk anymore or they can't hug you anymore, they're still that person, and they still love you the same.
I look at it that we all have blessings and burdens. Even people who are healthy have burdens. I've got problems. You've got problems. Everyone has problems. And, well, I got another problem with ALS, but I'm not different than anyone else.
The fact that he wakes up with a smile and goes to sleep with a smile and is really genuine. I don't think he's trying to hide anything. I think that's just the way he is. And I think it's because he has peace and that he's accepted whatever happens is going to happen.
I don't stress about the future. Whatever comes will come. And I have nobody lives forever anyway. Life is a terminal illness.
We have one life, all of us have one life to live on earth, and we make the most of it. And we shouldn't spend it all worrying about the future when we have today to enjoy.